I'm far more aware of there being a UK-French relationship in this Starmer era than I was in recent years. It certainly feels like it's changed.
Yeah, hugely. I was actually having this conversation with a former Starmer aide only earlier today, and we were sort of trying to work out what the breakthrough has been. And we think that, partly there is I think that the two of us in our conversation sort of concluded that we think Trump has sort of provided a bit of a, should we say, a gentle shove in the back of a few European leaders, but in particular, I think the UK and France, where there does seem to have been a bit of a stepping up of attempts to even be in the same room and on the same page about stuff. And that also, I think it was difficult. The relationships with France and other European leaders was incredibly difficult, with how many people had been in those previous administrations who had been very vocal around the Brexit debate. And that, sort of to some extent, was there a bit more of a, should we say, blank canvas, or just more of a slightly ajar door to take advantage of? And I think it's interesting. I don't know what's going to be said about Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's been, he was very early on, was sort of attending lots of meetings with Keir Starmer and seems to have been much less available to the media, which he was when he was a shadow minister, but actually has been quietly getting on with a lot of work behind the scenes. And I think him and Keir are very different personalities potentially compared to some of the previous folks that were perhaps involved in some of those more public exchanges with our European partners and allies than in previous years, whereas I think these guys now it's much more professional. It's even to some extent a little bit more transactional. It does feel like there are some outcomes from things, but even the social media, I think it was Macron, wasn't he at Chequers, and there was a sort of big affectionate hug at the door, and it's just the optics just seem like there is room for a positive dialogue and perhaps for progress to be made than perhaps we've seen before.